Sometimes I think we've lost sight of what e-ink was originally meant to do. The core promise was simple: a paper-like display that's easy on the eyes even in direct sunlight, paired with an incredibly low power consumption. But over time, that promise has been buried under layers of complexity. Android tablets with Google Play support, stylus input, even color displays. Impressive? Sure, but in chasing versatility, one might argue that many of those devices have compromised the very things that made e-ink special to begin with. But there's a different kind of use case here. One that doesn't try to turn e-ink into a do-it-all productivity tool. One that actually plays to its strengths. Digital picture frames might not sound exciting at first, but when you think about it, they're a perfect match for e-ink, and especially with recent advancements in color e-ink technology. Quiet, ambient, and energy efficient, they don't need fast refresh rates or interactivity, they just need to look good and permanently show an image. This is the reflection frame, a digital picture frame that uses Spectra 6 color e-ink to display your photos and artwork in a way that feels more organic and less like a glowing screen. And it might just be one of the most fitting use cases of this technology in recent years. Let's take a closer look. The reflection frame uses a 13.3-inch color e-ink Spectra 6 display, a different kind of color e-ink technology than what you'd find on most current devices. While something like the Kindle Colorsoft or Booksnote Air 4C rely on e-ink Kaleido 3, which uses a black and white e-ink screen with an RGB color filter on top, Spectra 6 takes a completely different approach. It uses colored e-ink particles directly, no filter needed. I like to call this real or true color e-ink, because each color is physically part of the e-ink display. The 6 in Spectra 6 stands for the 6 base colors it can produce: red, green, blue, yellow, white, and black. Each pixel can show exactly one of these colors. No gradients, no subtle shades. What's interesting though is that these colors are generated with just 4 different particle colors, according to e-ink: red, blue, yellow, and white. So there is color mixing happening to create black and green, and to create the illusion of more colors, the screen uses dithering, basically mixing those 6 tones in a pixelate pattern that tricks the eye from a distance. With a pixel density of 150 ppi, that trick doesn't hold up well when you're up close to the screen, like you would be with an e-reader or tablet. You'd easily notice the dithering and the lack of smooth transitions. But for a digital picture frame, where you're typically standing a meter or 2 away, that limitation becomes much less noticeable. The dithering is still technically there, but when you're just casually looking at the frame, it blends in surprisingly well. I'd say it's only noticeable with more complex images, with finer detail, like this Enterprise D art piece with lots of different colors and gradients. For regular photos and less complex pictures, it's not very obvious. What does stand out though is the color quality. Red, green, blue, yellow, and black all appear incredibly saturated and color-rich. They really pop, not just compared to other e-ink displays, but even compared to some printed materials. And it's not just my perception. When I measured color vividness with the spectrophotometer, I got values of 142 for red, 68 for green, 70 for blue, and 93 for yellow. These are the best values I've ever recorded on any e-ink display. For comparison, those same colors printed on a photo paper reach vividness levels of around 177, 84, 101, and 114. So Spectra 6 isn't far off, and all in all, much more vivid than any other e-ink screen I've seen. And unlike displays using e-ink Kaleido 3, Spectra 6 doesn't suffer from the same dark appearance. Reflectiveness is still slightly worse than real paper, but the reflection frame still blends in naturally when mounted on a wall. It doesn't stand out as a screen. That said, this approach isn't without trade-offs. Where the base colors, red, green, blue, yellow, look vibrant and high contrast, anything that relies on color mixing through dithering is less impressive. For example, cyan and especially magenta, the 2 remaining colors in my standard color test, only reach vividness levels of 19 and 9 respectively. That's more in line with what you'd find on Kaleido 3 displays, and significantly below the values of 30 and 118 of the printed paper reference. So in short, the closer a color is to one of the native tones, the better it looks. But when more mixing is required, saturation drops. But even so, it's far from a deal breaker, because taken as a whole, Spectra 6 offers the most saturated, vivid color experience we've seen on e-ink so far. And applying that to a product like the reflection frame is without a doubt one of the best use cases for this display technology. Comparing a few printed photos with the reflection frame makes it clear what I mean. This is the closest e-ink has come to reproduce printed colors. Of course, how close it gets depends on the specific image. But overall, it's just a surprisingly good experience. As I said, the reflection frame blends in naturally with its environment, not just because of the e-ink display, but also thanks to its overall design and construction. The frame is made of plastic, build quality is solid, and it can be mounted in either portrait or landscape orientation. It's available in black and white. The mat around the display is held in place with magnets. And you can remove it easily, and there are two options included in the box. That brings me to one of my only criticisms of the reflection frame. The white mat isn't perfectly flat. It has a slight curve, which is noticeable even without removing it. It's not a major flaw, but it does stand out a bit when you look more closely. Aside from that, the design is simple and functional, and for a digital frame, that's exactly what you'd expect. And I think one of the best things about the reflection frame is how easy it is to change a picture. You'll need to download the companion app available for both Android and iOS. From there, you can either choose from a selection of included artwork or upload your own photos. To send an image to the frame, you simply move your phone near the bottom left corner. The app detects the proximity via NFC and starts the Bluetooth transfer automatically. So NFC is a requirement for the transfer to work. Keep that in mind if your phone doesn't support it. Once you make the connection, it also shows you the current battery level of the frame. This process works reliably well, and they only had an issue once with the phone not connecting to the frame, which was easily fixed by just trying it again. Once the image is uploaded, it takes a few seconds for the e-ink display to refresh. And here it becomes clear why this kind of technology isn't suited for fast and frequent interactions. The screen goes through several stages of flashing before the final image appears. For a tablet or e-reader, that would be incredibly frustrating. But for a picture frame, where the content stays static for long periods, it's a non-issue. The whole process of changing a picture is quick and frictionless, exactly what you'd want in a product like this. That said, one thing I'd like to see improved is how the app handles custom images. Right now, when not doing any manual adjustments, it stretches them to fit the frame, and if you want the correct aspect ratio, you have to adjust it manually. The company claims up to 2 years of battery life if you update the image 3 times a day. Realistically, I doubt many people will update it that frequently. But that claim isn't far-fetched, and here's why. First, the frame has a 5000 mAh battery, which is quite large for an e-ink device. More importantly though, e-ink is bistable, meaning it only uses power when the image changes. Once the particles are in place, the screen holds an image without consuming any energy. So even accounting for some slow battery drain over time, the 2-year battery estimate actually seems plausible, especially with infrequent updates. And if the battery charge is getting too low, you can charge the reflection frame via USB-C on the back. And that brings us to the price, probably the main reason why people might hesitate to buy the reflection frame. At $350 US, I wouldn't call it overpriced, but it's certainly not cheap. For that kind of money, you could print and frame quite a few photos to hang on your wall. But as always with e-ink, you have to factor in convenience that it brings. Because the same argument applies to e-readers and digital notebooks. Yes, traditional alternatives are cheaper, but they don't offer the same level of flexibility. With the reflection frame, you don't need to print anything. You can just change the image whenever you want. No tools other than your smartphone and the app. No physical hassle, no waste. Uploading a new picture takes less than a minute. And that kind of immediacy makes a difference if you enjoy switching things up regularly. So overall, I really like what the reflection frame is doing for several reasons. The images are vibrant, not just by e-ink standards, but even compared to print. It's easy to use, and more importantly, it brings e-ink back to where it originally made the most sense. Single-purpose use with long battery life, no unnecessary distractions, and just enough smart functionality to make life easier, not more complicated. It's not for everyone, and the price will be a barrier, but the reflection frame shows that even if you ignore the whole e-ink note-taking craze, the technology still has a place when it's used for the right purpose. It's trying to be a tablet. It's a simple, flexible way to display images, and it does that well, no more, no less. If you found this review helpful, consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss future videos on e-ink and other eye-friendly tech. Thanks for spending your time watching, and I'll see you in the next one.